couple paths here. I can react in a way that's probably going to, just fuel the situation even further for me. I'm going to spiral on all of these unwanted emotions, and the outcome probably isn't what, I desire, and also the other people on the other side. Or I can respond to the situation in a little bit more of a calmer, clearer way.
Hello and welcome to the Real Success Show. I'm your host, Candice Mama. If you have been wondering, what is one thing I can start doing today to start living a very different life? Well, today's guest is just for you. Marc Champagne is the author of Personal Socrates, where he speaks about how asking the right questions will change the whole course of your life. Before we jump into it, be sure that if you like this episode, share and subscribe so that more people will find us. Now, here's Marc. Marc Champagne, thank you so much for taking the time to be on the Real Success Show.
Thank you, Candice. I can't wait. It's going to be super fun. Your energy is always lit up. So, I'm getting just as much out of this as I hope the listeners will.
Oh, I know they will. I know they will, especially based on your book, which I want to jump into. But before I do, Marc, you have got one of the coolest names in the world. Like, you really do. Like, you were a born rock star. Like, how do you feel about having such a rock star name?
Received. I'll take anything, whether it's the gray hair at a young age and the last name is Champagne, whatever can help me stand out, I'll take it. But yeah, it's a fun name. It's a fun name, but it comes with some funny jokes and stuff. I used to be called Bubbles at time, and there's all these like crazy little nuances, right, with when your name's Champagne. But it's fun. It's fun. I just pop the cork. Let's have a good time.
I love it. No, it's a perfect surname. And I have the surname Mama. So I know the
Yeah,
antidotes and the quirks that come with having a different surname. Um,
exactly.
But jumping into it, Marc, I first want to know, because you are the master of questions, which I love. But I want to know, how do you describe yourself as Marc today?
Oh, I should have known this was coming. This is one question I've probably asked 300 people at this point, so I should probably reflect on it myself, which I have, obviously. Uh, you know, I think that evolves as our journey does, and there's definitely some staples there for me when it comes to like characteristics and values and so forth. But I've noticed that over the years, and especially right now, I've just lightened. Just trying to be, even with the book and with the book launch, just be present, like not get so hung up on hitting lists or books out the door, like all of these different things. Just be present, be here with you, and like bathe in that energy, right? And because then you start to see the path, you see the signs, like, oh, I need to go that route, and that just lights me up. So I would say behind all that is just curiosity and just understanding, being clear enough to understand, well, this feels like the right path for me, and these are my people that I just want to be around and do everything I can to help them, and vice versa, and so forth. And I just, it comes back to that, living a life that feels lighter. You just feel happier, right? Like not to say I'm not stressed. Don't get me wrong. I'm up and down just like everyone else, but thankfully I have a lot of practices that can flip the mind back into kind of a creative and energetic state, which is a gift, and I completely realize that. But also why I'm out here doing everything possible to make this stuff accessible to people.
Mm. Oh, and accessibility. I want to actually jump into your story, because you developed
Sure.
an app, and this app had 87 million, close to 90 million users and impressions on Apple. So, that was a mindfulness app, Marc. But what
Mhm.
happened on that journey? Like, because you created the app, but you're not still creating the app. So something
That's a
happened. What
nice
was
way
the
to say
journey
it.
of that?
You're so polite. What you're getting at is, yeah, in the same year that we reached 86.9 million people, shortly thereafter, I had to hit delete from App Store. And that was the lowest of the lows for me. Not just because I had to delete an app, but I essentially had to delete an identity for the last 3+ years of just being all in on this venture. And it was one of the first guided journaling apps that was on the market at that point. If you could imagine, think about Headspace and Calm, how they were doing a really great job guiding you into meditation through content. We were doing the same thing with prompts to fire people up, fire people's journaling practices up. And, just financially didn't work out. And I have no doubt we could have made it work out, but we ran out of cash. And I'd say we ran out of mental capacity as well. I got to the point where, I was doing all these podcasts, and I was interviewing people as well, as I continued to do. And I just started to feel like a bit of a hypocrite. So here I am doing everything possible, right, to help still people's minds, help keep people's minds healthy and thriving. And I feel max stressed, like the most stressed I've ever felt. And there was a disconnect there. And it was really hard to come to the realization. I mean, that obviously the fact that we were running out of financial capacity made it a little bit easier, a little bit more cut and dry. But it was really hard to accept that I had failed in some sort of capacity, and failed at something that felt so right, and that had the potential to reach and really impact, millions and millions of people. Like, that was the heavy part. And we're not talking about a parking app. I mean, this was someone's journal. So there were, I think, about 200,000 people that were active at the end that, had memories in there. And we were doing everything possible to make sure that we had like export features, which weren't there yet. But just to have that before we shut things down, so people could at least get their content and their data. So yeah, so those periods, I'll just never forget it, because I was in Toronto, Canada. Our team was scattered around the world. I was in this co-working space by myself. I mean, in terms of my team wasn't there. And I'm sitting at, my laptop screen looking at that huge number, and about to hit delete from App Store, and all the wrong questions just started to surface, right? Like, how could we fail at such a colossal level? What would my family think? What would all my ex-colleagues think? That I remember them sitting across in the lunchroom or my desk saying, wow, you're so courageous. Like, I have an idea too, but I just can't do it. Like, I can't leave. And thinking, what am I going to tell those people? So yeah, there's an arc in that story, but I'll pause there.
Oh, Mark, there were so many moments there where I got chills and I was just reflecting with you. And one of the big words you used, and I thought it was so important and profound, is identity. It wasn't just a job,
Yeah.
it wasn't just an app, it was your identity. And I think a lot of the time in today's society, we're speaking about getting to the top, achieving a big dream, getting to that pinnacle. But no one tells us what happens when you do reach there and it doesn't actually work out. No one
Yeah.
talks about,
Yeah.
hey, I'm at the top of the mountain. I'm like, nothing's really working out for me. And so, when did that really, really hit you, where you realize I'm at the top of the mountain? Everything I thought I wanted and everything that felt, and you said the words felt so right, is no longer
Yeah.
going to be right for me moving forward.
Oh, now you're giving me chills. Felt so right when you say that, because the overall path felt and continues to feel very right. It was just at the time that vehicle that was keeping me on that path was the part that felt off, in terms of my mental state while running it, for example. So I guess just to clarify that piece. But it was, after deleting the app, those weeks that followed, those were the toughest, because now I was in this state, almost like a void of, okay, well, I've landed in a space that I've been practicing these things for over a decade, but like now I'm actually working on it and trying to make this more accessible for people. This is the work I need to be doing. Like, that was so clear in my mind, but I just deleted that app and shut down that business. And going back to the industry that had come from just didn't feel right. And that was the backup plan. So now I'm faced with this situation where the backup plan that doesn't feel right. What does feel right, I don't have a path forward in at this point. And you start to lose hope in those scenarios, and like all the wrong questions start to circulate. And we were in Toronto at that time, and it's just, that's the most expensive place in Canada to live. You just question again, like, how are we gonna afford our rent? And I had a 2-year-old at the time as well. It's like, is this stress coming into the house as well, as much as I was doing to try to shield that? And it wasn't though until really dialing into the present moment. Like, even when I deleted the app, I'm in this beautiful co-working space. There's brilliant, smart people. Like, there's free coffee. I mean, just small things. The fact that I deleted the app on a laptop that most of the world don't have. I mean, just whatever I could do to pause that looping negative narrative just long enough to ask a different set of questions. And finally I got to that, which was, well, what do I want for my life? And that was enough of a jumping off point to then ask follow-up questions like, well, what would the days look and feel like? Who do I need to speak with? What path could this take? And slowly, kind of like question by question, then a plan starts to develop and hope comes back into the equation. And it's still up and down, don't get me wrong, but at least, it's progress. And I think Tony Robbins says this, like, the key to happiness is just progress. We just want to feel like we're making progress personally, professionally, whether it's small, big. But when we feel like we're moving forward, we also typically feel good as well.
Wow. And that is the question, right? Which is, you ended up going onto this journey and you wrote a book, which I absolutely love. It is beautiful. Everyone should go out and get it. It's called Personal Socrates, because you actually break down the Socratic method of asking questions. So do you want to tell our audience what that looks like?
Sure. Well, the way it came up, it's a bit of a funny story behind it, was that I was speaking to the now publisher and the founder of that company, Joey, about the book that I was writing and the premise behind it. And then I was also explaining, I said, at this point I've interviewed definitely over 200 people. And I said, there's a pretty clear formula to their mental fitness. And it's usually around clarity, intentionality, and so forth. And, they ask these great questions, and they ask other questions and follow up and so forth. So he said, oh, you're talking about the Socratic method. So, well, the Socratic what? Like, I know of Socrates, I know of the method, but that's as far as, I've ever gone. And I remember him saying too, he said, well, if we do this book, you should call it Personal Socrates. I said, absolutely not. I am not a philosopher. This does not at all land for me, until I started to get curious and I went down, a search engine rabbit hole and started to really study Socrates and the method and what people were writing about this method, and came to this realization, or I guess this moment of wow, that literally this method of questioning has been around since like the beginning of time. In a sense, it has stood the test of time. We're all using it in some capacity, but we don't even really realize it. We're not really using the sequence of questions with intention for the most part. So, many of us are on autopilot, and it's just that life is kind of set up in that way. And I started digging into, all these different articles that scholars were writing, and they're defining all these different buckets of the question types, like probing assumptions, questions to help unlock clarity, challenging like the status quo, and questioning the question. Like, there's just all these question types, and I was thinking, no one would remember that ever, like, unless you're in a PhD in philosophy and like that's your project or thesis. I mean, we're not going to be in a situation be like, oh, I'm going to pause, I need to ask my clarifying the assumptions question and be on my day. So that's when I started to get excited, because I figured, well, clearly the method works, but there needs to be a better narrative behind it, and a modernized version of the system. And that's essentially how the book's structure came to be, and the summary of all of those questions really, and also that formula of just top thinkers in the world, that first we need to start asking questions to help expand our clarity. So on a personal side, Who am I? Who am I striving to become? Big questions, but I mean, we need to know this stuff. Like if we're just, because if not, we're just kind of fluttering around in the clouds and not really, understanding, well, like what's really driving us? Like, what do we really want? Back to that big question that I was asking. And then once you get into the next phase, then it's just all questions around intentionality. Well, if this is the person that I really want to become, this is the person that makes me smile. Do my habits, systems, do my actions, my behaviors, the people in my life, the work that I'm doing, do those things support that person? Or are they actually pushing me farther away from that person? And once those two buckets are kind of in check and we're getting clear, then the third part, in which is the third section of the book, expanding possibility just happens by default, because our minds, it's like we have more mental real estate to again see, like that's where I need to go. Like we have all the answers to our own questions. It's just our minds are so fogged with, legit issues. I mean, emotions and decisions. There's a lot going on in the world right now, now more than ever. Whatever we can do to just kind of organize that mind so that we can then access the channel, just like a neatly organized library, tons of knowledge in there. But if you push all the bookshelves over, it becomes a hell of a challenge to find what you're looking for.
Oh, I love that, Mark. And you did mention that, we're living in a very crazy time right now, and emotions do come up. So when you do ask these big questions and you're asking yourself the right questions, they don't always feel comfortable. They don't feel good. They don't give you the butterfly feeling a lot of the time. They bring up fear. So once
Yeah.
people get the answers, or they start working through the answers of who they are, or asking themselves really big questions, when those emotions of fear flood them, or anger, or anxiety, how can people process that in order to still continue the method?
Yeah, great question. Yeah, I mean, because that often, there's or I have conversations around, why aren't people asking these questions? And I think you provided the answer. I mean, it's not the question, it's the answers that we fear, right? And it's one of those situations where the prompt that comes to mind is like, what am I pretending not to know? We know, we know what's in the back corner there, but whatever's in the back of our minds scares us, right? And it's probably the area that we need to go to, though. But it doesn't make it any easier. So what I would suggest for people is first and foremost, just be kind to yourself through the process, right? Like, this is a no judgment free zone. And if you're journaling on these questions, pen to paper or with an app or audio notes, like, it doesn't matter. The practice of journaling is reflection. That's the key. Find what works for you. But why I'm bringing that up is I would suggest people to start with listing out their ground rules for the reflection. For me, some of those things are, I'm not here to judge myself. I'm not here to, what's the word I'm looking for? I wanted to say, yeah, I guess judge. I'm not here to judge myself, and I'm not here to, look back and kind of shame myself on things that I'm like, what, I would have done that differently, and then dwell on it, versus just, but let's learn from that experience and move on. And then the other thing too, that's key for me is, unless I decide to share what I'm writing, this is for me. I'm not writing this in a journal to submit to Fast Company. It's funny. Like, there's a lot of people, and I was like that as well. You get caught up on, this has to be a perfect journal entry, which kind of defeats the point of the practice. So first, set the ground rules. That already lightens the pressure of the situation. And then I think it's just really, doing everything that come out of your mind and into your body. Like, if you're firing up fear or anxiety with some of those questions, which we need to do, because whether we spend the time doing that or not, they're still there. So whether we do this first thing in the morning, acknowledge, yeah, you know what, I don't feel the greatest, and I feel that in my chest and my stomach, it feels tight. Often just doing that and acknowledging where you're feeling it releases it, for one thing. But if we don't do that, it's still coming in with us in the day, and that's going to affect, again, our mental capacity. It's going to affect our energy around others, and just, it compounds over time. Next thing you know, you have tightness in the shoulders, your neck hurts, and you need a massage. that's the minimum version of that, how that can play out, obviously. So, just acknowledging how you're feeling with a simple one word check-in, like, how do I feel today? Where you're feeling that, and then how do I want to feel today, for example, to set an intention, right? That's one way to shift it. And regardless of how heavy the experience may be, depending on which questions you're asking and how deep you're going, always finish on gratitude. It's the easiest way, like coming back to when I deleted that app. I'm grateful. I'm thankful that I have this technology in front of me, this laptop that actually will give me the tools and the resources to move forward. Or think about, wow, I'm breathing. Like the fact that I'm alive and my lungs work. I mean, it's pretty impressive stuff, right? I mean, the other thing, think of someone that you would love to thank. And just do this right now. You can do it really fast. Think of someone that puts a smile on your face that you haven't said hello to in a while or thanked. Just send them a quick text. Hey, just thinking about you. Hope you have an amazing day. Now, you've just made their day. They're going to write back, make your day. And most importantly, your mind's not looping in any of the other stuff that might have been there. It's in a happy, kind of thriving state. So anyway, I've rambled a little bit there, but I think the key message: set some ground rules, go for it. Don't judge yourself. Just feel the feels, get in there, uncover the insights, because it's just data. With data, then we can make decisions, course correct, and always finish on just an awesome note of gratitude.
Oh, I love, love, love that, Mark. There's something you mentioned there that I really wanted to talk about. And it was the question, what are you pretending not to know? And so I'm curious as to how you came across that question.
Well, like many of the questions through my podcasts, that question was left by someone by the name of Jamie Wheel, and he's the co-founder of the Flow Genome Project, where they do a ton of work in how to bring people into flow states that athletes typically experience. How can kind of how can we use these in regular day to day? And I remember, because in my show, typically at the end of the interview, I always ask the guests, what are 2 or 3 questions that you reflect on a frequent basis, or questions that have made big shifts in your life, and take note of that. Thousands of them at this point, and the ones that, like that one for me, I remember I kind of tipped back and was just looking up at the sky. I'm like, that's a good question. I mean, that really makes me think, and then I reflect on it. Usually the next morning in my own journaling. Which is how the app came to be. That was my practice. I'd be getting these questions from random sources, and just taking the time to slow down 5 or 10 minutes, reflect on that question in relation to where I'm at in my life, because now it's relatable, right? And all of a sudden you start the day with just this beautiful energy and with insight. And that's what the app was. And that's essentially what the book is as well. So there seems to be a pattern here with my work.
I love it. And, Mark, a lot of people will say, I don't have the time. What do you say to people who say, I don't have the time to ask the question, I don't have time to journal, I don't have time for all these techniques that people keep telling me about? What do you say to someone in that kind of mindset?
Yeah, I get it. I understand the mindset. I'm going to call a little bit of bullshit on that one. But here's the thing. Here's the reality of the situation and how people can bust that mindset. And it comes down to a term or something I call practice stacking. And what you can do, and it's not about, hammering out more practices to feel more productive in a situation. It's more so taking a look at your day, and most importantly, your morning. Because the morning, I mean, it really, and you hear this one too, I'm not a morning person. That's totally fine. But maybe it's in the evening. But figure out that point of time where most of the world is still quiet. I think that's key. And it's not impossible if you can't do that. It's just you have to rely on more willpower, because you're having, more messages are coming in, more distraction, more interruptions are possible. So I would suggest, though, if you can get up a little bit earlier, not an hour. We're not talking about doing breath work and meditation and cold plunges. I'm trying to just get up 10 minutes earlier. And while your tea is steeping or your coffee is brewing or you're taking your first cup of water, just ask the one question: how do I feel right now? Where do I feel that in my body, and how do I want to show up today? It's the easiest place to just get started. And I promise you, if you do that for even 1 week, 5 days, you're going to start noticing the shifts. Because when we set those one word intentions, I want to feel energized today. Our mind looks for those situations, looks for those opportunities, and so forth. So that's one way to just start. The other thing is just to redefine your perspective on what these practices are. I'm not sitting down for an hour writing. Sometimes it might be longer, longer exercises, and I would say the benefit or the result of sitting down for that time actually saves an incredible amount of time in the long run. Because think about it. Let's leave people with this question: am I climbing the right mountain? Sometimes we're not. And most of the times we don't even know that we're not. So taking 2 to 5 minutes just to sit with that question, because we know if we slow down and again, just still the mind, that we can answer that question, then all of a sudden, all of the work, all of the things that you're doing is more intentional and actually fueling the right path versus the opposite, right? And which is wasting your time, because eventually we get to that point, and usually that's the big moment where everything starts to fall apart, or we feel super stressed, things aren't flowing, and there's a reason for that. But just like a good brand strategy or a strategy for your sales force, or like in the work world, we have to spend time with the strategy part, right? And the biggest game of all, life, like, a lot of us don't have strategies. So let's just take a few minutes to slow down, and then we can be clear. If we feel better, we have more intention, and things just start to flow.
I love that. Am I climbing the right mountain? That is such a great question to ask. And, for people, Mark, who are going to ask themselves that question, and they're going to think to themselves, I'm climbing the wrong mountain, but I've climbed
Yeah.
so far and I'm too scared to leave this mountain in case I don't find the other mountain or I can't climb the other mountain. Where can people start with deconstructing that kind of mindset?
Yeah, that's great. Your questions are so good. Um, well, the first thing I'll say is that, let's say you're halfway up that mountain. The idea, or the visual that I'd love to leave people with, is not that you have to kind of rappel down right to the bottom and start at the bottom on the next mountain. Everything that got you up halfway to your current point, those are all experiences that now you can stack on and leverage to have the courage and have the experience and the knowledge to essentially, let's just swing over to the next mountain, which we know is the right one, and we can start a little higher from the kind of base camp, let's just say, if I'm sticking with this analogy. Um, and I mean, again, just once again, just listing out, like, what were the experiences, what were the situations that while I was in them felt terrifying, felt like I just wanted to run from, but for whatever reason, and list those reasons, I conquered those situations, right? Like for me, the app, even though, financially it didn't work, I would say 80% of that experience worked really well. It's the only reason I'm speaking with you. It's the only reason I have a book out. It's the only reason the podcast is still running. And I remember thinking, because I've never had the desire to write a book. It kind of just happened in that way. But I remember thinking, well, I hear that it's pretty challenging to write a book, and you would know this as well. Like, it's not just something you do on a Sunday type thing. But I've never developed an app either, and I'm not an app developer, but we reached 90 million people, so we did something right. So, taking that as an experience to then bring in the courage to take the first steps forward on the next journey, right? And just keep recycling those moments.
I love that. And as we go, right, Mark, like let's keep the mountain analogy going. Life
I started a
happens.
monster here.
Life happens to us. There's
Yeah.
people who may treat us in a particular way, conflict within your career. Maybe you're not in the relationship you want to be in, whatever that may be. How is this practice going to help you deal with? Because when life is coming at you in full force, sometimes it can be very difficult to stop and ask the big questions. So, how can people deal with chaos in their environment while they're trying to move forward intentionally?
Yeah. Well, but this is where if we can deploy some consistent mental fitness, just like if you think of the physical fitness world, if you think of Olympians or high performing athletes, they're not they're not doing different things while they're ripping down the downhill ski course for the Olympic run or going for the world record. They're relying on years of consistent training. So for the regular day-to-day life situation, when we're hit with those big moments, it's not in the moment that we're all of a sudden going to pick up, this brand new journaling practice or this brand new meditation practice. We can rely on those things to help like lighten the pressure. But this is where I just encourage people to, again, 5-10 minutes every morning, or at least 5 days a week, to start to just slowly start checking in with yourself. Because what happens with that, whether it's checking in with yourself through journaling or checking in with yourself through some breath work or meditation, like find what works for you, just like exercise. Just because you don't like to run doesn't mean you rule out exercise, right? Figure out the practice, and there's a million different things. Journaling is mine for sure, because it's just the questions give us the luxury of the pause and allow us to then understand and unpack what's going on. But as you're doing that, you're becoming more and more self-aware, so that when those situations come at you, it's almost as if you have this superpower to zoom up to the top of that mountain way above, like you're up in the airplane, and time slows and you can see, okay, a couple paths here. I can react in a way that's probably going to just fuel the situation even further for me. I'm going to spiral in all these unwanted emotions, and the outcome probably isn't what I desire, and also the other people on the other side. Or I can respond to the situation in a little bit more of a calmer, clearer way. Now, this doesn't always work, but this is where the check-ins come in. Like if you get to Friday, again, 10 minutes. The most impactful thing I've ever deployed in my own life is to take probably 10 to 20 minutes on a Friday, 3 p.m., not at the end of the day because we're rushing to kind of finish the day and get to the weekend if that's the case, but 3 p.m., and ask 3 questions. What did I learn this week? What would I have changed this week? And what can I celebrate about this week? And so again, finishing on the gratitude, first of all, you've just released like a valve of pressure on your mind, because all of that stuff was there, right? And you can say, okay, wow. So now I realized, looking at your calendar, looking at your text, looking at your activities, yeah, those things really move the needle. Like those were the right things, right? Those were supporting the mountain that I'm supposed to be on. And I reacted instead of responded in that situation. Next time if that comes up, I'll make a subtle little shift. Just like if something happens, if you lose an edge coming down the downhill ski route, I mean, you can practice for that, right? So you can practice for this stuff as well. And then when you finish on the gratitude, obviously now you've just finished the week. We do so many amazing things all week, but we forget about all of them and only remember about that terrible conversation or that email that went unanswered. So it's just a quick check-in, a reminder. Wow, like this will be on my Friday check-in for sure, because the energy is lit up, and I mean I can't wait to start my day on this energy. Sure, I'll probably get emails that aren't answered or something's going to come up, but I'm going to come back to this moment because this moment is going to move me forward next week as well.
Oh, that is brilliant. And isn't it interesting that we all think that I'll never forget this? Like I think
Yeah,
human beings work on the assumption that they will never forget anything. Like I'll never forget that I
yeah,
did this. I'll never forget that I got this encounter or this conversation or whatever it is. And the thing is, I think the biggest beauty of journaling for me is just it gives you the ability to not be directly involved with whatever it is you're talking about. So in the sense
oh
that if
yes,
you're in a conflict, right, it allows you to be like an external party and read
yeah,
about it in a very objective way instead of like when it's brewing in your head and you're like, oh, this is driving me insane. Is that not
yeah.
accurate, Mark?
It is, and it makes me think. I have to share another practice then on that topic, and It's one of the profiles in the book by a meditation teacher. His name is Jeff Warren, and he co-wrote the book with the ABC News anchor Dan Harris, called Meditation for Fidgety Skeptics. And Jeff, and this is what I write about in his chapter profile, he does exactly what you're saying, and he names the emotions. Like his analogies, it always makes me laugh, and the humor also lightens it as well, right? Because we get real wound up in these situations, and because they feel very real, obviously. But he'll say, "Oh, there's anxious Debbie that just stepped into the party over here," or "depressed Bill just came through the door," type thing. And again, he's like stepping out of the situation, right? I mean, that's happening inside, but now that it's like these fictitious people that have come into his party, and he'll say things like, "Okay, you're here for a reason. I get it. I see you. You can stay for a cocktail, but you're not staying the whole party. So you can now. Thanks for coming, but you're gonna have to take off at this point." And again, it's just, I mean, just talking about it with you, we're smiling, and it like lightens the situation, right? Because I mean, let's be real. I mean, these are real strong emotions. Often the emotions, I'm not saying all the time, but majority of the time, fear and anxiety, they're not warranted in the situation, because our minds, or our biology is still wired to survive, a million years ago type thing. And hasn't caught up to our psychology and our minds. So it's no, they feel very real. It feels like we're running from a tiger for sure. But if we can just calm it down a bit, the humor, the lightening of the situation, and then acknowledging, that's the key, acknowledging that they're there, right? And then again, this is where you can stack on that other practice of, okay, well, where in my body am I feeling that? And then see you later. And that's often enough to at least shift ever so slightly to get you into another place, right? The other thing people can do, easiest way, very personalized way to do this, list out 5 activities that without a shadow of a doubt put a smile on your face. I mean, things like journaling for me work. Peloton spins, did that this morning. That's why I was rocking the tunes with you after. I mean, these are things that I know if I do, I am almost guaranteed that I'm going to come out in a better mindset. So know that you have those tools at your disposal and deploy them when you need them.
I love that. It's that forearming, because we know we're going to experience battles, things that don't go right. And then you just have that with you, just so that when you need that state switch, you can go and do what you need to do. For me, music is a big one. I'm just like, I put on a playlist, and even if I'm upset, I'm gonna dance right now.
Yeah. Well, because you can't be grateful or excited and fearful at the same time. It just chemically doesn't work. So you can, when you jump into that mode, when the music is popping. I had that one song that I played for us on repeat for like half an hour essentially. And it was just putting my mind in a great state. And what's happening, we're getting this beautiful neurochemical cocktail of serotonin and dopamine. These are all the feel-good chemicals, right? So I don't know, like, this is accessible. I mean, pop on the song, right? Move, shake the body a little bit. I mean, literally takes seconds. And the alternative is, if we don't do that, it could be hours and days of mental torture.
Mark, you mentioned that it is so accessible, and you're right. Everything you're giving away, no one has to pay for. My question is, what is it about the human brain or the way we operate, where although we have the keys and the tools, we still don't use them? We're so resistant to doing the things we know are good for us.
Yeah. The simplest answer I can think is that it's because it's not the status quo. It's not everything we're talking about is not necessarily part of the autopilot life. Just like, for example, there's a reason why, I only know the stat in the US, but that 12 or 13% of the US population is metabolically healthy. I mean, you go into a grocery store or a supermarket, if you're not thinking and you're just on default, you're coming out with a shopping cart that is not food. right? Everything in the middle of the grocery store for the most part is processed, full of chemicals, all that stuff. So it's not, when you start then to like look at these things, it's not surprising that people are, obese, there's diabetes, hypertension, cancers, all of these different things. There's a reason for that, right? So it's the same thing though when it comes to our minds, right? If we just wake up, fire up our email, and we get hit with all these messages, fire up social media, get all these comparison situations happening, all this, fear of missing out, all of these different things. You turn on the news, there's nothing good on the news typically, right? I really live on the news front. If it's that important, someone will tell me, or I will find out in some capacity. I don't need to go down the rabbit hole of just getting hit with those headlines of negativity. So I'm not surprised, right? Because, and I fall victim to it as well. I mean, I obviously use social media for my own business, but I have to, this is where the consistency and the mental fitness comes up. I realize, whoa, I'm just endlessly scrolling here. So I can stop now and get back and reset. But without the practices like that, just like the athlete, right? Without the consistent training, you just don't see it. The self-awareness is not there, and you just keep going, and for the most part, a lot of the people around you are doing that as well. So it feels like this is just the normal situation, but it doesn't have to be. And I think that's what I'd love to leave with everyone. It doesn't have to be. And it's just the smallest of micro changes that can take you from where you're at to world class. Literally. It's possible. It's more than possible. Like, you can do it right now. You can choose today to be in a beautiful state of mind all day. You're going to hit the dips, but you can acknowledge that you hit the dips, leverage those practices, do those things, pop out some gratitude, send that text back into a beautiful state. It's a decision.
Oh, I love everything you said. And for me, it's actually something I'm dealing with right now in terms of food. I mean, I'm good with these mental practices and so on. And I think because I'm naturally very small, I never ever thought about food and eating healthy and actually nourishing my body, except when I was an athlete. But that was still not in the context of I need a healthy running body. It was this food is going to help me compete at my best, right? And
Yeah.
as you said, when you go into the shopping center or into the store, you're so wired to do what you've always done that if you're not
Yeah.
conscious, you leave with everything you would have left for prior. So you have to
Yeah.
develop it as a practice before it becomes normal to you to be like, no, I prefer bananas instead of the chocolate bar. I'm preferring this over that, right? So I love what you said because
Yeah.
every human being can relate to that.
Well, and just be kind to yourself and take it slow, right? Because I think that's the other thing. We have a tendency as a society to just like flip the switch and try to go all in. I mean, that may feel good for a bit, for a short period of time, but then what happens, right? Like, everyone falls back into old patterns. So just slowly, like, make micro adjustments. Do one thing a little bit differently each day. Maybe it's just, you know what? I want to stay hydrated this week. So my focus this week, I'm going to check off every time I have a glass of water. I'm going to first understand how much water I should be drinking for my age, my body size, all of that stuff, right? The clarity piece, and then take the intention to actually do it. And then you'll see by the end of the week, you're probably going to feel better, more energized, all of that stuff. And then you can work on the next thing, right? But just, yeah, like it's these monumental like overhauls that we strive for or seek that are possible with the micro changes, and over time compound to bigger things. It's like climbing that mountain again, right? Like, it's very rare. It it doesn't always have, it's, I'm not saying it's impossible, but there's the route of taking the helicopter straight to the top of the mountain, right? Which is a possibility and is possible for some. But then there's also the route of just taking one step at a time up the mountain and arriving at the mountain with all of that wisdom and all of that experience of reaching the top. I would say that's more valuable, but just to keep our focus on the one step, that's what'll get us there.
Focus on the one step. That is incredible, Mark. I want to ask you a question as we're nearing the end of our interview. I love your book. It's so well written, it's so well put together, and it prompts you into the practice of journaling. It is such a brilliant book. So thank you for writing it, firstly. But what I really want to know, Mark, and I was curious as I was reading it, which came first, right? Was it the question that prompted you to, speak into a particular person, or was it a person that ended up prompting the question for each chapter?
Oh, that's such a good question. I've never thought of that actually. So, I mean, give me a few seconds to compile an answer to that one. I think intuitively what comes to mind primarily the person. Just like because half of the chapters in the book I'd say are people that are alive today that I've interviewed, and then the other half are people like Maya Angelou or or not James Clear, he's still alive, Stephen Hawking and Kobe Bryant, Jane Austen, and so forth. And I was compelled to those people based on what they've done in the world, and curious myself to see, well, if I study their work and how they showed up each day, like what questions would be inspired that we can then use that person that everyone knows of in some capacity and use that story or use that perspective to then combine the mental fitness and the prompts. Because it wasn't some of the profiles of the people that have passed are direct questions from my research, but many of them are actually questions that were inspired from doing the research and are coming from me. Like Picasso, for example, the profile on him and his work, I was going through the process myself as I was writing the profile, and just came to this realization that, here's someone that has so many works of art that are obviously still in museums and celebrated and marveled at, and they're very different in terms of the phases of or styles of art. You can say, there's the blue phase for Picasso when a friend of his had committed suicide and he was depressed. You can see that in the work. And then it moved into this rose-colored phase where he met his wife and so forth. So it shifted, but the realization for me was that, wow, like it's the whole body of work that makes Picasso Picasso. And isn't that the same thing with our lives? Like, are we in the blue phase right now? Possibly, but the rose phase could be coming as well. And linking that with some of the stuff I wrote on Jane Austen. Well, then, if we've seen kind of how we've gotten to this point, and we've seen which color phases we've gone through, which is it's just another way to look and slow down and reflect. Then we can also decide to write the next chapter. Right, we have like, who do I want? Who are the characters of that next chapter? Do they align with that mountain that I'm trying to climb, or do they align with the person I'm striving to become? And that's what was so fun to write the various profiles, to see how because the practices are all the same. That doesn't change, but it's the narratives that invite us and open up the opportunity to go down the path to do the practice itself.
Oh, love it, love it, love it, Mark. And I know that as we go through life, different teachers speak to us, different questions speak to us. So I'm curious, in your book, which chapter is currently speaking to you?
Oh, I would say there are probably two themes. So one being the profile on Chip Conley, which is how can I be the most curious person in the room, and the through line of that one is actually to be the most curious person in the room. You also have to be the most present. So for me, like, as we kind of almost open the show, presence always, because same with, like, I'm human like the rest of us, so I need those reminders as well. I reread those profiles when I feel like I need it as well to just kickstart that mentality again. So presence, just reminders to be really here and in this moment and soaking it all up. And then the other part, when the reverse is happening, when things feel like out of my control or life is starting to spiral, there's a beautiful chapter on inspired by Jerry Colonna, which is how do I meet life where it is, or how do I accept life as it is, I think is the direct question. And everything in that prompt or everything in that profile is around impermanence. That, the emotion we're feeling right now is impermanent. Like, it will pass. And there's a ton of different examples to show how that happens in different situations. But just again, just that reminder that, yeah, I might be in a storm right now, but the clouds will blow over. Like, it just happened. That's we can expect that will happen. Might not be as fast as we want it to happen, but it will happen. And while we're in that, then we can use all the other practices to make it less painful and hopefully a shorter cycle.
Mm. It makes me think of an interview I just saw, and I forgot who was being interviewed. And he was asked, what phrase, statement, or motto gets you through life? And he said, "This too shall pass." And so, of course, this is one we hear all the time. But he said, it's very interesting because when he started really reflecting on that sentiment, he only ever applied it in the bad times, when things were terrible, when he was in a bad place, when things weren't going his way. And he says the older he's grown, that has been a sentiment that has actually made him happier, because he realizes that when he's in the
Mm-hmm.
happy moments, in the good times, he needs to really savor those moments, because it's going to pass and something is going to
Yeah,
happen. And when he's in the bad times, it is also going to pass and something good will come. And I thought that was just so beautiful. And I think it speaks
it
into
is.
exactly what you said.
Oh, I mean, I love that. It's a great reminder for myself as well. Just, you're right. I mean, soak up the highs, and when you're in the lows, know that they will pass, and there are things you can do to slow down or shorten those lows. But yeah, it's just this, the seasons of life, right? Just like nature. I mean, we've got to go through winter to get to spring and summer. And some people love winter. I'm starting to love winter too. I'm starting to ski and snowboard, but for years I didn't like it. So, I guess it's just, to stick with that analogy, is finding the beauty in all the seasons. And when you can do that, and when you're present in those all of those seasons of life, then it's just a happier place to be, and it feels good, right?
I completely agree. And I think for me, what I value in the difficulties is I don't want to say I savor the difficult moments, but I realize how much I'm going to grow through them. Because when I look back in hindsight, the biggest growth, leaps, and jumps I've ever made were in times of difficulty. I don't remember ever being in such a good place or comfortable place where I was like, I'm so happy I should change my life, you know?
Yeah, exactly, right? This level of happiness is just too good.
Exactly. Oh, Mark, we are coming to the end. But before I ask you our final two questions, I really want to cover, where can people get your book, Personal Socrates, should they want it?
Oh, thank you. I mean, the easiest way, because I have the links, whether it's Amazon or directly from Baron Fig, is just at my website, behindthehuman.com. And the audiobooks there's Kindles, I would encourage, if you can, to pick up the physical copy for the reasons you mentioned earlier. I mean, we really spent a lot of time on the design, and just to make it an experience for people. So, and that's available primarily through baronfig.com. But all of these links are at my website.
It is so true, because it is one of the most beautiful books I've ever received. It feels, every time I read it, it feels like I'm opening a gift, which is a rare
Oh, thank
experience
you.
for me, because I read a lot, right? But I remember
Yeah.
just opening it, and every time I've had this overwhelming feeling that I was opening a present. And the reason I can't show it on screen is because it's in my bedroom where I'm reading it. So
Oh, well, that just fills my heart.
Mark, we are going to ask you the final two questions. The first one is, what is real success to you?
I mean, it's showing up happy more days than not, and there's just so many factors that can contribute to that. So, I mean, to me, like, I've started the day very successful. Like this, it's the micro moments, right? that stack up. I mean, if you would have asked me that probably 10 years ago, I would have had a very different answer. It would have been a very, oh, my career's taking off, or the app is, doing X amount of revenue and yada, yada, yada. But I don't know, just going through that whole journey, that stuff doesn't matter. What matters is the journey, the experience. I know it sounds cliche, but yeah, just showing up and waking up with a smile, and then laying your head down on the pillow at the end of the night, grateful that wow, that was that day was filled with ups and downs, but at the end of the day, it all nets out as I feel good.
Oh, I love that. And Mark, the final question. What is something about Marc Champagne that we will not find on Google?
Oh boy, that's what question? What a question. Um, you probably won't find this, which I'm kind of sad about. I should have put more effort on this, but I did a 2 week, 3 week project where I went to Senegal with Photographers Without Borders and volunteered with them to capture the work of a charity called, not Charity Water, but Water Charity, and just to capture the work that was being done in the communities, and seeing, like, this comes full circle to the happiness or success part, like just seeing the smiles on the kids playing soccer and like having fun together, and when we would show up, that just this like overwhelming sense of gratitude of like, wow, what's been possible with just such a small thing that we take for granted for every day in other parts in the world. And I'll never, like, I can see this one kid's eyes is like beaming with energy and excitement, and we were playing soccer together, and I mean, I have chills just thinking about it. You probably won't. I mean, if you search deep enough, there at one point I did an Amazon book on portraits of Africa. It was what it was called, but I don't think it's up anymore. But that is just something that I cherish and I want to do more of. Hopefully, as the years come.
Oh, that gave me chills. I mean, I could see it in my mind, and it's just so beautiful. I really do hope that we find it. But Mark, thank you so much for your time. This has been an amazing conversation.
Thank you, thank you. You are an incredible host, and just human in general. Just such a gift to this planet. So thank you.
Thank you, Mark. I love this interview. So, what I'm actually going to ask you to do is make sure you comment with what is the one big question that you're going to be asking yourself that's going to change your life. As always, it has been my greatest honor and privilege to serve you this week, and I look forward to doing it again next week.